vested in me, I hereby declare this meeting of the Conshohocken Borough Council duly open and ready to conduct any business that may come before it. Roll call.
Councilmember Totino.
Present.
Councilmember Serna.
Present.
Councilmember Kingsley.
Present.
Councilmember Barton.
Present.
Councilmember Elam.
Present.
Vice President Sokolowski.
Here.
President Leonard.
Here.
Mayor Aronson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. If everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council did hold an executive session this evening prior to our meeting on property and legal matters. At this time, I would ask for any public comment on agenda items. For the record, there is no public comment for agenda items. The first item on the agenda is land use matters, public hearings, and ordinances. The first item is consider adopting ordinance 07-2022, vacating a portion of Corson Street. Mr. Peters. Oh,
Thank you, President Leonard. If we could go on the record at this time. There we go. This is the scheduled date and time for a vote on the petition of 400 West Elm LLC to vacate a portion of Corson Street between West Elm Street and the Schuylkill River Trail. You held a hearing on this petition and the ordinance attached thereto on April 6, 2022. And this evening, after having held that hearing, the motion would be to grant the petition and adopt the ordinance if you're so inclined.
So the motion, if council is inclined, is to adopt ordinance 07-2022, vacating a portion of Corson Street associated with the 400 West Elm Street development.
I'll make that motion.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consider adopting ordinance 08-2022, removing residential uses from the SP zoning district. Again, I will refer to Mr. Peters.
Thank you, President Leonard. This is the scheduled date and time for a vote on ordinance 08-2022. That ordinance is titled An Ordinance of the Borough of Conshohocken, Montgomery County, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, amending the Code of Ordinances of the Borough of Conshohocken, Chapter 27 Zoning, Part 15 SP-1 and SP-2, Specially Planned Districts 1 and 2, Part 16 SP-3, Specially Planned District 3, and Part 22 SP-4, Specially Planned District 4, to remove residential uses from the SP-1, SP-2, SP-3, and SP-4 zoning districts, repealing prior inconsistent ordinance or parts thereof, providing a severability clause, and setting an effective date. Council held the required hearing under the municipality's planning code with respect to this zoning amendment on April 6th, 2022. At that time, we continued the matter to this evening for a vote, and this matter is now before you for that vote, if you are so inclined.
So this evening, the motion, if council is inclined, is to adopt ordinance 08-2022, removing residential uses from the SB zoning district.
I'll make that motion. Sokolowski. I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consider adopting ordinance 09-2022, amending zoning administrative provisions. Again, I will refer to Mr. Peters.
Thank you, President Leonard. This is the scheduled date and time for a vote on ordinance 09-2022. That ordinance is titled An Ordinance of the Borough of Conshohocken, Montgomery County, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, amending the Borough of Conshohocken zoning ordinance of 2001 by changing the required notice requirements and procedures of the ordinance with respect to hearings under the ordinance, amending the provisions related to expiration of zoning variances and special exceptions, and adding an expiration period for conditional uses, confirming that certain provisions of Part 12 R-O Residential Office District are no longer of any force or other effect, repealing prior inconsistent ordinances or parts of ordinances containing a severability clause and providing an effective date. Again, council held a hearing on this ordinance pursuant to the requirements of the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code on April 6, 2022, and the matter is now before you for a vote.
So the motion would be to adopt ordinance 09-2022, amending zoning administrative provisions.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consider approving Resolution 2022-12, approving preliminary and final minor subdivision and land development for 124 West First Avenue. Mr. Peters.
Thank you, President Leonard. The developer presented this application to you at the April 6th meeting. This is an application for minor subdivision and land development for 124 West First Avenue. Staff and I and your other professionals have prepared a resolution for your consideration this evening. That resolution sets forth the background with respect to the project. Again, it's proposed to demolish all existing features on the property, divide it into 2 lots, and construct a single-family attached dwelling on each with a 1-car garage. There were variances previously granted by your zoning hearing board for side yard setback and building coverage. That relief was conditioned on the developer working with the neighbor to address stormwater management issues. In connection with its application to you, the applicant has requested 4 waivers. They are a waiver from SADO Section 22-409.2 to permit grading within 3 feet of the property lines, from 22-421.4 to permit street trees on the property instead of the property frontage, 22-421.6 to permit installation of building-mounted lighting, and from Section 22-804 to permit negotiation of a fee in lieu of park and recreational space. The recommendation from your staff and professionals is to grant conditional approval of the minor subdivision and land development. That would include granting the waiver from Section 22-409.2 to permit grading, from 22-421.4 with respect to street trees, and a partial waiver from 22-421.6 as the applicant is going to install building-mounted lighting. And finally, a partial waiver from 22-804 to permit payment of a fee in lieu of park and rec space in the amount of $8,000, the standard $4,000 per unit that you have applied. Also, the relief would be conditioned on compliance with the following review letters: your Borough Engineer's review letter dated January 31, 2022, the Borough Zoning Officer's review letter dated February 8th, 2022, the Borough Traffic Engineer review letter dated February 16th, 2022, the Borough Fire Marshal review letter dated January 19th, 2022, and the Montgomery County Planning Commission review letter to the extent required by the Borough dated February 9th, 2022. The approval would be conditioned on compliance with the zoning hearing board conditions, including the condition I mentioned earlier with respect to working with the neighbor with respect to stormwater management. The applicant shall execute a stormwater operations and maintenance agreement and a land development and escrow agreement subject to my and the borough manager's approval. The applicant shall pay all outstanding invoices owed to the borough in connection with the application. The applicant shall execute a deed restriction to the satisfaction of the borough solicitor and borough manager, limiting use of the garages to parking only and no storage. And the applicant shall otherwise abide by all terms and conditions of the resolution. Again, the resolution was drafted by your staff and professionals and is now before you for consideration.
So the motion, if council is inclined, is to approve Resolution 2022-12, approving preliminary and final minor subdivision and land development for 124 West First Avenue.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consider authorizing advertisement of a stormwater management ordinance update and stormwater amendment to the SALDO.
At your April 6th meeting, Borough Engineer Karen McNair presented the amendments to the stormwater management ordinance and also the affected sections of the SALDO amendment. There were no concerns or questions from council at that time. We did not receive any questions over the course of the last 2 weeks. So in front of you this evening, if inclined, would be to make the motion to authorize advertisement of those amendments. And then it will be back on your agenda for adoption.
Thank you, Stephanie. So the motion this evening would be to authorize advertisement of stormwater management ordinance update and stormwater amendment to the Saldo.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. The first item is approve and adopt the March 2nd and March 16th regular meeting minutes. The second item is approve the March ending treasurer's report and accounts payable. So the first motion for council is to approve and adopt the March 2nd and March 16th regular meeting minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. The next motion for council is to approve the March ending treasurer's report and accounts payable in the amount of $914,235.06.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is new business. Conduct interviews for board and commission vacancies. The first person for interview is Ashley Gatos for the Human Relations Commission. Ashley, if you could come up, please. Good evening. Thank you for coming in.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Anyone on council have a question?
Can you just tell me about your interest in this position?
Absolutely. So I work in HR currently. I also have my MBA with an HR concentration. So I feel that it's very close to my interest and my experiences. And I've always wanted to give back to my community. And I felt when I saw this opportunity, it was directly aligned to an area that I really could impact my community and give back.
Thank you.
I have a question. What do you do at Vanguard with the diversity, inclusion, and equity teams that you could maybe bring to the borough?
So we run a lot of different programs to really increase our applicant pool and make sure that we are attracting women and minority talent into financial industries. I'm currently leading an internship to attract HBCU sales talent, so I'm working on that, which is an underrepresented population. I've also helped increase diversity in our financial planning group by targeting different groups, understanding where we need to look to cultivate that talent. So I think I could take some of those strategies and bring them here and just make sure that we are maintaining an open and inclusive environment. My experience from living here for many years is we have that. So I think there's not a lot that needs to change, at least from what I have experienced in this community, but making sure that we are always keeping an emphasis on being open and inclusive. And when there is a matter that needs attention, swarming it and making sure that we are taking it seriously so that we can maintain that inclusive environment that we have built.
Thank you. Does anyone else for council have any questions for Ashley? No? Thank you, Ashley. I think
Thank
your
you.
answers really summed up all of our questions, so.
Thank you very much.
Which
thank you.
which is great. You answered them all for us. Thank you for coming in this evening. The next person for interview is Tyler Dunphy for the Human Relations Commission and Zoning Hearing Board. Good evening, Tyler.
Good evening, council members.
How are you?
Good. How's everybody doing?
Good. So, Tyler, let's start with the zoning. What is your interest in serving on the zoning hearing board?
Yeah, happy to answer that. So I have deep Conchi roots. My mom was an original school teacher at Conshohocken Elementary way back in the 90s, eventually had me and had to step aside, but we've been coming to Conchi ever since. My sister actually met her fiance at Great American Pub 3 years ago, and I lived here pre-pandemic, loved it so much, moved back, and now live at West 3rd in a condo I just bought last year. So deep Conchi roots, care deeply about the community, want to continue to live here, want it to grow and foster the growth that it's seen, even in the last decade. And as a condo owner in the community, I have a true vested interest, and my intent to remain in the neighborhood. I also have a background in zoning hearing board experience. When I was first out of law school, my firm, Timoney Knox, over in Port Washington, I actually dabbled in zoning hearing board as the solicitor. So I'm familiar with some of the nuances. Now, every municipality has their own nuances, but familiar with what the zoning board hearing's purpose is, how it tends to function, and that kind of thing. So I think familiarity with the process. And then I also just, circling back to the first point, want to ensure that Conchi grows but also maintains the integrity of the neighborhood that we all love, and it's kind of balancing that interest between growth and then also maintaining the integrity of the neighborhood. So I think those 3 points would be towards my candidacy.
Thank you.
How do you see your role on the zoning board?
So I think it's got to be about listening. I'm a firm believer of listening more than talking. And I think I would want to listen to the applicant, and then not only the applicant, but any objectors to what the proposed applicant would be seeking. So I think it'd be listening, and then taking into account all the information before me, and then trying to apply, much like I do as a lawyer in my day-to-day, trying to apply the law to the facts and really see, is this in line with the Borough Code and the zoning board? That's their job at the end of the day. Is this in line? Are we granting this variance? Is that totally out of board with what the intended purpose of the code was? So I think it's a listener, and it's an interpreter, and then it's an application of the zoning board, of the regulations to the facts before us.
Have you had a chance to attend any of our zoning hearing board meetings?
I admittedly have not yet. Been getting my feet wet. I'm actually on my HOA down at, I live in Third West Condo, so been getting my feet wet there. Took a new job, so I haven't yet, but I am interested to start coming. Finally, things are slowing down. I work in the adult daycare industry, and as you can imagine, during the course of the pandemic, it's been running around like chickens with our heads cut off. So admittedly, I haven't yet. Interested to go. Even if I don't get this position, I will start going, just because I really enjoyed it. I originally lived in Springfield Township in Montgomery County, so I used to go there even outside of work, just to interest in the small communities with that kind of feeling. I like going to those things, and I feel not enough people go.
How did you find out about the availability and openings for the zoning and human relations?
Yeah, just on the website. I knew Conchi was where I wanted to make my home, saw that there were vacancies, and also saw in the newsletter that vacancies were applied. It actually was from the sewer authority that was advertising them, and that's what first drew me to the website. So I found on the website, saw that there were vacancies, wanted to hop on that now that I was finally getting a little bit more free time. So I would say that the mailer from the authority, and then further research on the website.
Thank you.
And what's your interest in serving on the Human Relations Commission?
Yeah, so this one I also care very deeply about as well. So I'm a proud member of the LGBTQ community. So causes of diversity, equity, and inclusion have always been really, really personal and deep to me. And not only that, but I have a depth of experience as being a prior labor and employment attorney, dealing with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, and then federal compliments, both on the plaintiffs and defense side. So it's not just the defense side that I was on. So I know what these laws are. I know what enforcing them entails. And I have a similar experience now going in-house because we deal with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission there. So my experience with the PHRC continues. But more importantly, I think it's back to that first point. I have seen how important these laws are and how often sometimes they're under attack. And so it really is important to me about and it's intersectional too, right? It's all types of marginalized communities that need these protections, and so that one is really, really personal to me, and so that's kind of where my drive to join that comes from.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Anyone else have any questions? No? Thank you. Thank you for your interest in both.
Yeah, thanks for letting
We
me speak
appreciate
tonight.
it.
Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Next item on the agenda is consider approving Resolution 2022-13, authorizing and ratifying change order number 2 for stormwater sewer repairs on Poplar Street.
Thank you, President Leonard. The next two agenda items all deal with Poplar Street. We are closing out the construction project. We will be asking for authorization to process final payment. Before we ask for final payment, there was a change order associated with an increase in quantities in terms of mill and overlay and curb and seal. Additional curb replacement was also necessary. So the first item for consideration this evening is change order number 2 in the amount of $5,938.15.
So the motion for council this evening is to approve Resolution 2022-13, authorizing and ratifying change order number 2 for stormwater sewer repairs on Poplar Street in the amount of $5,938.15.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. And then the next item is specific to the final payment request. This final payment request has been reviewed by the borough engineer and has been recommended. The recommendation was in your meeting materials. That final payment request for the pipe replacement only is $113,359.31, making the final total project cost $125,459.51.
So if council is inclined this evening, the motion would be to authorize final payment for storm sewer repairs on Poplar Street in the amount of $113,359.31 for the pipe replacement and a total project cost of $125,459.51.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. The next item is consider approving zoning escrow balance releases.
There are two zoning escrow balances that are being released back to the applicants. The first is for Propco Pine Good Management LLC in the amount of $1,044.22 plus interest.
So if council is inclined, the motion is to approve the zoning escrow releases for Propco Pine Good Management LLC in the amount of $1,044.22 plus interest. Do I have a?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
And the next zoning application that has been closed with escrow being returned to the applicant is for the validity challenge from Stephen Pollock in the amount of $1,038.66 plus interest.
So if council is inclined, the motion is to approve zoning escrow release for the validity challenge to Stephen Pollock in the amount of $1,038.66 plus interest.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is unfinished business. The first item is consider approving waivers of off-street parking for 207 Fayette Street, 308 Fayette Street, 128 Fayette Street, and 320 Fayette Street. So the first motion for council to consider is approve the waiver of off-street parking for 207 Fayette Street for Lori Burt Golf Simulators.
One more. Do we need to correct the street?
It's Forest Avenue.
Yeah, I was
not
gonna
Fayette.
Oh,
Oh,
yes,
sorry.
it is a
Forest.
misprint.
It's Forest.
And for the record, it is off-street parking for 207 Forest Avenue for Lori Burt Golf Simulators.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next item is a motion to approve the waiver of off-street parking for 308 Fayette Street for Our Daily Bagel.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next item is approve the waiver of off-street parking for 128 Fayette Street for Oyster House and Grill.
I'll make that motion.
I'll
Thank
second.
you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The last item under this section is a motion to approve the waiver of off-street parking for 320 Fayette Street, ENJ Wax Studio. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consider appointing an applicant to the Planning Commission. So I would be seeking tonight from council a motion to appoint David Switkowski for the Planning Commission.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consider authorizing an extension of the towing agreement with EVB Service Center.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, and for the record, that contract will go until December 31st, 2023. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The last item on the agenda is consider approving Resolution 2022-14, approving an amendment of the approval of preliminary final subdivision and land development for Matson Mill. And again, I will refer to Mr. Peters.
Thank you, President Leonard. At your April 6th meeting, we talked through the request for an extension of the time period within which the Oak Street rail crossing must be installed due to supply chain issues. The request is to bump that date back until June 30th, 2023, at which time, if SEPTA does not or has not completed the rail crossing, the developer of Matson Mill will be forced to post escrow in the amount of the remaining work to be done with respect to the rail crossing. This resolution achieves that extension of time to June 30th, 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. So if council is inclined this evening, the motion would be to approve Resolution 2022-14, approving an amendment to the approval of preliminary final subdivision and land development for Matson Mill.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment this evening? If you could come up and state your name and address for the record, please.
How you doing? My name's Ed Zale. I haven't had the pleasure of speaking with you for the past 2 years because of COVID.
We missed you, Ed.
In the past 2 years, I've had a couple items I wanted to bring to your attention. Number one, I wanted to thank you for fixing the pothole, sinkhole that was on Stoddard Avenue at the train station. It had been there about 2 years, but about 3 months ago, you were finally able to get it done, the Public Works. Also, you were able to replace the mini stop sign at Harry and Stotford. The contractor that you had forgot to put the stop sign back when they did the cement pavement, so you replaced that with a full stop sign now. So they're the two really great things that I can talk about. A couple of the other things I wanted to ask is if, I don't know if that would be you, Stephanie, that would ask for a street light replacement. The bulb has burned out at Stoddard and Oak Street, and it has been for about 2 years. I talked to the Pico guy, and he says he can't do that. Why the Pico guy can't do it? He said it has to go through the borough. Fourth thing, and I talked to Stephanie earlier, and I just wanted to ask you folks about the dog park. And see, I walk a lot by the trail, and I see everything that goes on there, and my dog's with my daughter. But there's 50, 75 dogs that use that dog park. And most of them live in those two communities. Some come down from the streets. And unfortunately, they haven't been able to use them, to use the dog park, so they're out on O'Neill's property, running around, which is fine, except the people used to have picnics and parties on that open land. And now with the dogs there, they do pick it up, but when they urinate, you can't really pick it up that. So I was just wondering, since it was last September with the hurricane, how much longer will it be since to get FEMA or whoever you're looking at to get a new piece of property if that's not going to be the piece of property? Do you have any idea how that long might take?
I'm going to say it will take some time. And
But why?
leave it, everything takes time.
I know,
This
but
is.
it's been 9 months.
If you want to, call Stephanie or the administration and have a discussion about it, please do so, or
Okay.
call me or any of the other council people, and we will be more than happy to discuss that with you.
Okey doke.
Okay?
Mr. Zale, we're evaluating all the options at this
Right.
point. We don't want to put back a dog park in a place that has flooded out twice and been wiped out twice necessarily. So we are trying to figure out, is there a better location that we currently own as one of our properties? So we want to make sure that we're thoughtful about it.
Right.
We understand where in the community we need to look for it. So it is taking us just a little bit more time
Okay.
because we want to be thoughtful and we don't want to definitely put
Stephanie
out
did
money and
tell
have
me
it wash
about
out
that.
again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fifth one, you talked about Mason Mill. Now, that's a 5-story property, and it's right behind me at 2 on Grant. And it's wood construction. But the Birch, which is next door, 304 units, that's 7 stories, and I still see wood construction. I was under the impression when you went above 5 stories, you had to do concrete. Mason Mill, 5 stories. The Birch is 7 stories. And the 6th and 7th floor are still wood framed. Now, maybe building code, I'm not an expert on that, but everything I read is when you go above 5, it's got to be steel or concrete. So, once again, if somebody could look into that.
And yes, and I will say that I'm sure that will get looked into, and thank you for your comment.
Okay. If you will allow me to give you these so I can ask you some questions.
So,
400 Elm Street. There's paper clips enough for everybody. There's 12 of them. 400 Elm Street. It's a mess. The street's a mess. The mud's a mess. The dust is a mess. The dirt's a mess. So I went over as a private citizen and talked to McDonald Construction, Pat Pellegrino, construction manager. And I said, hey, come on, the neighbors were suffering. I've talked to a dozen neighbors on Elm, Old Elm, Coursing, Light. And if you can see from the pictures, the rain, this was Tuesday, those pictures from Tuesday with the rain. The mud's just out there. I said, and if you look at one of the back pages, construction sites do have truck tires must be washed. So he did say they're planning to get that, a tire washing station and a high pressure station. And he also said, you got to put more stone down. And he did agree that, yes, they are. And if you look at the very last page, I got a written response from the construction folks at Land Title Property who are doing the building, and they acknowledge my complaints. And like I said, I speak for the trees, it's the Lorax deal. You got to help the neighbors. And Karen, this is down in your neighborhood. I don't know why I have to go and look at this kind of stuff and complain when you're the ward representative for Ward 1, where 400 is. I mean, haven't you ever, don't you see what's going on there? That you would be the one that would take it up with your colleagues or talk to McDonald or talk to Equus? I had to call Equus out in Newtown Square, and I talked to Dennis McGinnis, and he said, yeah, you're right, Mr. Zale. We shouldn't have had that situation like that, and we're going to try to rectify it. But I don't really think that's my responsibility. I think it's the people that are elected that we see once every 47 months when you want to ask us to vote on your behalf or to re-elect you. But then my question comes back, do you ever have, I don't know, maybe you do, coffee clutches or something like that with your constituents where you just ask, hey, listen, what are some of your concerns? What's going on? I know the condo association, they do that twice a year, But that would really be helpful, so that, you know, we want representative government at the local level, not just in Washington or in Harrisburg, at the local level. You know, I've been doing this, I'm 74, I've been doing this since I've been 21, going to meetings, get elected to school boards and things like that. But I felt, when I was doing that in Cheltenham, I felt a responsibility to communicate and to give feedback. And just like you mentioned earlier, I don't have the information right now, but let me see if we can call Stephanie, or I'll look into the building code about the 7-story. I might be completely nuts, but I did read something about above 5 floors. But getting back to this, the near neighbors are suffering. A lot of you folks, you're Upper Conshy. You don't have the troubles, the mess that we've dealt with. Matson Mill, with Hamilton Lane did a good job. Those folks, Oliver, they did a real good job. Amerisource, those poor people on First Avenue will never see the sun. And you said that was before you were elected. I appreciate that fact. But, you know, the Birch, the construction messes, the noise, they run their generators on the weekend 24/7. And that noise just reverberates up the hill. The people on Elm, First, Adrian, you're going to get it when they start building those 97 townhomes, you know, on Washington Street. The neighbors, you know, the growth is great, and the income generation is great, and the young people move in. And Equus is building this 12-story luxury apartment complex. But the fact of the matter is, it's going to generate so much more traffic. And now SEPTA is going to literally advertise on the Schuylkill Expressway to come to Conshohocken Park in their new 5-story building. I mean, I'm not sure, you know, how you won't be here, some of you, because of you decide to retire or not just go for re-election. But it's tough. And this young man talks about wanting to do, and both of them, give back to the community. I've been here 11 years, and I want to give back to the community. And that's the only reason I come and talk to you, because a lot of people don't take the time and effort. Some of the people I talk to on Old Elm, what's the point? The noise, the trucks. In the 100 block, the 200 block, the 300 block of Elm, heading towards Lafayette, there's not one 25-mile-an-hour sign. Not one. They don't do 25. And I know the police can't be everywhere. I was at a meeting a couple months ago, and the police, they do a tremendous job, and you all extolled how wonderful they are. And they are. They can't be everywhere. But 25 miles an hour on West Elm ain't happening. So, you know, maybe a flashing sign, like, because when you get down where 400 Elm is, there is a flashing sign. Your speed limit is. And I know your budgets are tight, but there should be some consideration of what can be done for the folks that live down on First and Elm. It's just 10 years of building and construction, Amerisource, Mason Mill, now 400 Elm. You know, you guys don't have that up there. I mean, you might get 9 townhouses in the Exxon station.
You do know that only half of us live in the upper avenues and the other half lives in this end, because that's where they represent. Just pointing that fact out for you.
Yeah, the Ward 1, Ward 2, yeah, I get that.
Ward 3, yeah. Ward 4,
Okay,
yes.
so hopefully you can, you know, even walk the neighborhood down here sometimes and see how nuts it is in the morning from 7 until 9 at the traffic, and from 4:30 until 5:30. It's brutal. It's brutal. So thank you for, let me see if there was anything else. There might have been one other thing.
Have you been over Elm?
Oh, they did have some concerns, the people on Elm and West Elm. the construction folks, it's just going to get more, but they're parking and taking their parking, the residents parking on the 400 block of Elm, and they're parking on Corson and on Old Elm. So that's some of the things they did mention to me, if something could be looked into that. Because there's no place for those employees to park, the construction workers. So they're parking on the residents' streets and taking up their parking spots. So,
I'm sure that's something that we can look into, and we do appreciate your comments this evening.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else for public comment this evening? Okay. Mayor Aronson?
Thank you, President Leonard. We had so many Easter activities around the borough the last 2 weeks, but I wanted to point out the egg hunt at the community center. As you can see, it was packed with kids and families. A big thank you to Lauren and her staff, who actually had to move the event completely inside because of the rainstorms we had that morning. And it still went off without a hitch. So thank you, Lauren, as always, for putting on these amazing events for us. We also have the Stolfos Martial Arts is hosting a community self-defense class at the Conshohocken Brewing Company next Saturday, April 30th. Suggested donations are $10, with all proceeds going to the Women's Center of Montgomery County, who actually presented their great work here just a few weeks ago. We also have our EAC Spring Cleanup this Saturday, 10 a.m. at the VFW. The spring cleaning will focus on the east side of the borough. All cleaning materials and volunteer shirts will be provided. The EAC asks that I remind everyone that this is a rain or shine event and to please register ahead of time. You can find that information on the EAC social media or on my social media. And finally, I'm very excited, especially after this public comment, to restart in-person office hours as we come out of COVID here. It'll be at the community center starting in May. They'll be held the second and fourth Monday of each month, 6 p.m. to 7:30. I look forward to having everyone stop in to talk or just say hi. And with that, have a good evening.
Thank you, Mayor Aronson.
Nothing tonight, President Leonard, thank you.
Thank you. Anita?
Thank you.
Nothing.
Nothing. Adrian?
Yes, I wanted to draw the public's attention to, right now the borough is seeking public input regarding the zoning ordinance overlay for Fayette Street. It's a real fancy way of saying we want the public's input on how we should be developing our main Fayette Street. It does not mean rebrand, does not mean rename. It means that we want to have like activity as well as an easy way of getting up to the upper avenues and all the way down to the lower avenues of Fayette. So please submit your comments to brogers@conshohockenpa.gov, and we will be having a meeting on Monday, May 2nd in the Emergency Operations Center here at Borough Hall at 6 p.m. So if you would like to give some input or just find out what's going on, please attend. That's it.
Thank you, Adrian. Mr. Tino?
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay. Vice President Sokolowski?
No, Adrian beat me to it.
He did. Okay. With that, I will say meeting adjourned.